Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on hints and tips. Today we're going to be covering how to use and utilize business rules, do the same with autofill rules, and look at color coding data in order to help it stand out. There's a list of the different things we're going to be covering today. We've muted all attendees, but please use the Q&A box to ask any questions, and at the end, I'll review and answer as many as possible. And if not, we'll get back to you with answers individually to all questions after the webinar. So let's begin with the introduction. On each form in Priority, you have the option to add business rules. As per the above left screen, you can access these at any time by going to the cog icon on the screen and going to Define Business Rules. Alternatively, you can use the design menu and then define business rules. This opens up the Define Business Rules page. If you have no previous business rules set up in a form, it will come up like this. If you already have some, it will take you to a different screen, which we'll look at later. We're presented with 4 sections: what our rule is called, what our rule should do, when our rule should happen, and who the rule applies to. So firstly, the top one is what our rule is called. It's pretty self-explanatory. You're just giving it a name. The what our rule should do section is made up of a drop-down menu that includes display error message, display warning message, and send email, amongst other things. You then have a subject and message free text field. This is for adding pop-up messages or the base text of an email or text message, which would be sent out as a result of triggering this rule. We can now see 3 boxes below that. Just highlight those for you now. These 3 boxes allow us to add dynamic information from the form or about this rule to my message or email text. Firstly, add field, which allows you to add the value of any field to the message. This is the value of said field at the time the rule is triggered. Add rule number to message. This will add the unique rule number that is created to the message, allowing you to differentiate between business rules that are triggered by similar if values. The third one is add rule description to message. It will add the writing from the first box, rule description, to the displayed message. This is similar to the number in that it helps differentiate similar business rules. Underneath those, we have 3 tick boxes. These are for if you're sending an email. They allow you to attach a copy of documents for this form to the email, and these tick boxes define the details of that attachment. Next, we come to the if statement, or the if section. We'll look at this in more detail later on as we create examples. However, this section is essentially giving you your rule parameters. So for example, if the value of the form field, whichever form field it is, and then what it is, so whether it's blank, less than, greater than, or between, and then it will give you further options to add this in. But we will talk more about that later. You can add further conditions by clicking the plus that you can see there, or you can remove conditions by clicking the X. There is no upper limit on how many different conditions you can add. Next is when our rule should happen. So the next section down, just hit. So you can either choose the business rule to hit when all conditions are met or when at least one is met. This is good for stacking, so you don't have to make multiple rules for everything. And finally, who the rule applies to. Is it just yourself, only a specific person, or all users? And then whether it's active only within the current company or all companies. So let's move into Priority now. And we're going to set up a simple business rule. As you can see, I'm already in the sales order form. This is the form I'm going to be using today. So we're going to go to that cog icon. Or the other way of doing it, which I said I'd show you, is define business rules. So as we don't have any set up already, we have a nice fresh business rules screen. And we're going to give it a simple error message and a simple description, no contact selected. We're going to display error message. Please select a contact to continue. And it's going to be if the value of contact is blank. All conditions are met for all users in all companies. And we're just going to reload the form just to make sure that's working. There we go. Sales order reopened. We're just going to select this one here, Harry Potter. As you can see, it doesn't have a contact. And when I try to click down to the sub-level, it says, please select a contact to continue. Nice and simple and working. So once we give it a contact, it is working. And we can carry on with our sales order. So now I'm down in this sub-level order items. If I go to the cog menu this time and go to define business rules, you can see what happens if we previously set up business rules. We find ourselves on a different landing screen. So here we can see the list of previously created business rules. This screen will appear if you open business rules and you've previously created business rules. The screen lists all the rules which are currently in place for this form. I can add, edit, and delete them and easily see which ones are active. We're going to create a complex business rule now. In actuality, I've previously created these, so you have to sit here and watch me do them one at a time. So we're going to go through them in rule number order, as you can see. So if we look at the top here, we've got 101015, 101016, and 101017. So what I'm going to do is press edit, and that way I can see what I've previously created. So it's essentially a double business rule. 101015 and 101016 are part of what I want to do together, and I'll show you how to utilize the copy function and so on to how I did this. So let's start with the top one, 101015. So this is a complex business rule. This example is of a rule that will email the line manager when a large order has not been flagged to run in MRP. And I'm going to warn the user first in case they want to adjust data. It's set up with a number of different if statements, and we'll see how well it works. So here we have the warning message business rule. I've called it high value order, and it will display a warning. And as you can see, the message will read, you might not be able to see, so I'll read it out. This is a rule description. So it's going to come up with, this is a high value order. An email will be sent to your line manager. Are you sure you would like to proceed? So I used the add rule description to message button. That replaces the rule description with the actual rule description, which is the high value order, as I explained. And within this message, it will trigger if 4 things happen simultaneously and only trigger when you attempt to leave the line of the subform. So it will need to have a total quantity of greater than 100. Its due date will need to be greater than at least the end of next month. Now, what's good about this rule is it means that once we move into next month, the end of next month will then be the end of December. So it is sort of keeps updating itself. So you don't need to keep creating new rules. And if the value of extended price is greater than 12,500, and the value of MRP is blank. This is because I would expect my MRP team, the team in charge of the MRP, to pick up on a massive order during the MRP run. So this is only if that extra stage of security isn't there. So for now, I've set it to all conditions must be met. However, later on, I may adjust that for a separate similar rule. And I've got it set to all users in all companies. So we've got our base rule now. And what we're going to do is copy it and adjust it for sending out the email that we spoke about in the rule text. Now, obviously, I've already copied it, but what I would do is, if I hadn't, is have it highlighted and just click the copy button. Nice and simple. So I used that. I copied and created this rule. I changed the description slightly, so it's got an exclamation mark on the end. And what I then did is I changed display warning to send email. Now, if it was set up in a working company, I'd probably have it sent to the user, who was the line manager, and their email would already be on the system. But just for this particular example, I've set it to send email to email address. I've got a subject now, which is the high value order. And what I've got in the message, so I removed the message and I've put in, this is a high value order. Could you please check this order at sales order, which means when the email comes out later, there will be a hyperlink which can take me straight back into priority at the exact sales order required. I've then left everything else exactly the same because I want it to pick up in the exact same way as it was in the previous example. So what we're going to do is we're going to see that working now, hopefully. So let's come out of here and we're going to put a part number in. Yeah, let's sell them a kitchen. And we're going to have 150 because that's greater than. Let's see how good my maths is. Let's just set that at 500. Set that at 300. Let's set the cost at 400 so it shows up in red. We'll talk more about that later. What we need now is to look at the extended price, which is well over the margin. That's good. My maths is absolutely fine. And the MRP box should be empty as standard, but it's worth just having a check. Yeah, it is. So when we come off this line, it's going to tell us the first rule that we mentioned. This is a high value order. An email will be sent to your line manager. Are you sure you'd like to proceed? If you press OK, and we'll talk more about that business rule in just a second. So we've come off the line. And whilst we wait for that email to come through to me, we can have a look at this. So what we may want is a simplified version that just pops up a warning for simple high figure individual items that doesn't send out the email. To do that, we can simply copy the first rule. So let's go back to the cog. Define the business rule. So what we did is copied this standard one again, and it created this 101017. Edit that, and we've just called it high value this time. And here we go. We'll pop back to that in a second. This is the high value order. Could you please check this order? And that is a hyperlink back to that sales order. So you can see that that's worked, which is really good. Really, really good. So we've kept it as display warning, but we've completely changed the text. We've taken out the complex stuff like the rule description, and it just says, this order has a high price or quantity. Are you sure you would like to proceed? And a question mark. And what we've got this time is we've kept if the value of quantity is greater than 100, and if the value of extended price is greater than 12,500. And we've switched from all conditions are met to at least one condition is met. And I've just set this one only for myself, so it's not for other users, but it is in all companies. So what we can do now is set up a second line. Maybe we're going to go kitchen 2 this time. And we're going to say 102 of these. And they're nice cheap kitchens. And we're going to go across now. And you can see that, excuse me one second. Do you know what? I'm just going to lower that a little bit. Just lower that to £70 just because I'm worried that it was going to not do what I wanted it to. So we can see that this order has a high price or quantity. Are you sure you'd like to proceed? That's because the quantity is over the amount, but the extended price is under the threshold. It would still pop up if both were over, but it's just showing you that it's not reliant on both being over, and it will work if just one. So you've got the or, and that's okay. We'll move on from there. And yeah, that works nicely. So I'm just going to jump back into the PowerPoint now. And we're going to move on to autofill rules. So these are data filling rules based off of conditions set up to trigger when certain data is filled into a form. For example, if you put a specific customer in the cust number field, the autofill rule could automatically fill in a different field, often the details tab or remarks field, but there are some other handy uses for the functionality too. Let's take a look. So the pop-up for new, copy, delete, etc. is almost identical to the business rules, so let's not worry too much about that screen and jump straight into the Define Autofill's main rule screen. So this time I've shown you the example of getting there via the design menu, but you can get there via the cog, the same as with business rules. So you'll notice the screen is similar to the business rules screen, but with some subtle differences. The first is that the first line, do the following. This is to determine what is changing and at what point it is triggered. So it is after updating insert field, set field as free text field, and then it moves on to if, which works the same as business rules, but in a slightly different manner. This would be your identifier, making sure that your autofill will only trigger on the right occasions. The when and valid for are exactly the same as business rules. So let's move on to an example and back into priority. So we go back up to the top, which is going to empty the screen up. So I'm going to start with a nice simple example using dates. I want my sales order to automatically set a due date on the end of the following month when I open a sales order. So I'm going to use order as my base, as that number should only change once to do the trigger. You don't want to use a field like status that may change multiple times, as if you ever need to override the field, you might find it overrides you when you make other changes. So we're setting that due date as the end of next month if the value of date is equal to today. Let's take a look at it. So we're going to use this cog, and we're going to go to define autofill rules. Need to find the right one. Here we go, second one down. So obviously I created it earlier. So we've got the after updating order, set due date as the end of next month if the value of date is equal to today. All conditions are met, all users, all companies. So this should, because the value of date is equal to today, this should mean that it always triggers when you first create your sales order, the date will automatically populate with today's date. So let's just take a look at that in action. So what we're going to do is any customer. Let's go with this one this time. And as we go down, so it's popped up the date here, which is today's date. and it's set the due date as the 30th of the 11th, which is the end of next month, the end of November. So really nice and simple. And this one's quite handy as well because it sets an automatic due date in the sub-level because it has one in the upper level. And as you know, the due date in the sub-level is a mandatory field. So now we've seen that date one in action, let's take another look at a popular use of this feature. And that is to add in specific details, like notes every time a specific customer is selected. So, go through the design this time. And the details. So I'm going to edit this one. So do the following. After updating order number, we're going to use order number as the standard when it's created. Set the details as have you told Gary. So Gary is a line manager who needs to be informed every time there's a new order or customer number that's equal to C00011. Now, if you put a warning message in, that might get missed, clicked through, ignored. But with this one, it will sit in the details tab, and it means more users have more of a chance of spotting that over the course of time because it won't leave. So let's see that one in action, shall we? Let's Control Enter. That's fine. We're just going to get rid of that one. And it's Albus Dumbledore. Lovely name. And we're going to go to the References tab. And you can see now it's shoved in those details. Have you told Gary? There is one thing that if your message is longer than the text field, that it won't fit it all in, it will just cut it off. So just exercise caution there. So one final example for you. My business rule is still going crazy. You can see it's still working there. So what I think is a really cool part of the autofill is the ability to stack commands. So if I just open up this again. So it's the ability to stack commands to create a chain of changes. So for example, if I have a sales rep called Heather, who's responsible for working in the south of England, and her alone covers that region, I can set it up so that when I set the value of sales rep to 001, Heather, it sets my sending warehouse as the transit warehouse, and then set up a separate autofill rule that uses the sending warehouse changing to transit to set the distribution route to south. So whenever I update the sales rep, it will automatically fill in the sending warehouse and the distribution route. I can show you those rules here. So after updating the sales rep, set the sending warehouse as transit if the value is equal to Heather. And then secondarily, after updating sending warehouse, set distribution route as south if the value of sending warehouse is equal to transit. I'll show you that one in action now. So what we're expecting is nothing to happen when I put the customer in. Just to stick a contact in there just so it doesn't keep bugging me. But here, we're going to put the sales rep as Heather. And what should have happened in shipment is it set the sending warehouse as transit warehouse and it set the distribution route as south. You can have a lot of fun with that. So I ask you to take that away, give it a go, and see how many chains you can make. Yeah, it's really useful, really helpful auto-filling in rule, and you can set your ifs up to make sure that it doesn't affect data that you don't want it to. So finally, let's take a look at color coding. So we've got this one down here. As you can see, we've already got some data here where the data is color coded. And let's just I'll just put this one back into draft. And then I make this 400. Make that one black. And if I make this one $310, I can make this one green. So there's a few reasons that businesses use color coding: to highlight an order which has a profit percentage less than an acceptable amount for your business, to highlight a shipment with a weight greater than the acceptable weight for your lorries, or to highlight when a line quantity is too big or too small. We actually use color coding daily at Meditech. We use this on the support desk to ensure that service calls with different statuses show up in different colors. This works pretty well for us. So as you see, we've got some data here in different colors. So what we've done is we just right-clicked in the field that we want. We've gone to record color. And if I show you the definitions for the current data on there, so what we've got is the profit percentage field. If it's between 0 and 64.99%, it shows up in red. If it's between 65 and 100, it shows up in green. Anything that falls outside of those parameters will show up in black. To make changes or to add new ones, you just right-click, go to record color, and define record color. You can set up as many colors as you like. I just find it easier when it's essentially a good or a bad to use green and red for obvious reasons. Okay, so that concludes today's webinar. Let's have a look now to see if we've got any questions. Okay, so there's one question here. Can anyone create business/autofill rules? No. Only users with the user permission write business rules for all can do this function. There's another question here. Can I utilize business rules to stop certain members of staff from changing data they're not supposed to? Yes. Simply by flagging the business rule to only be in use for the employee in question, this will stop that user from doing what you don't want them to. You can either give them extra warning messages, you can receive an email when they do it, or you can literally stop them by putting in an error message. To find out other ways of restricting employees' data, I'll be running a webinar on privileges and packages later this week, and we'll send out info about attending that after this session. Okay, that seems to be all of the questions. If any more pop up, we'll pop those out in an email to you. So thank you for listening today and enjoy the rest of your week.